So welcome back to another video of some random internet guy geeking out about his obscure JavaScript framework. First off, the most important thing, I've updated the framework demo font here to something that looks more like the Cyberpunk game font, which is what this whole style was about in the first place. So yeah, look at this. Look at this. Yeah, cool. Next up, the updates up to version 1.3.12 are pretty straightforward. All I had to do was rewrite the entire codebase twice, but that's cool because now we have the logging object and the DB object. And this time, a treat especial, we will be mostly looking at the core source files of Socio because there's really not much to demo here. So starting off with this DB object, what is that? It is essentially this kind of object that has two functions in there, a query function and an arbiter function. This query function is what we used to have before, the DB query function that you would just pass straight in. Now you have to pass it in just in this object here. Pretty much that's done here. Same old, same old. But now we also have this arbiter function. We'll get to that in a second because there's a cooler thing. In this main update function here, this big update function that runs the updates for all the SQL subscriptions, we now have caching. So this whole thing is way more optimized. So for this particular call of the update function, this run to notify all the subscribed clients that an update has happened to some kind of SQL resource, we first of all just check the cache. Otherwise, it actually runs the DB query function like it used to, and then caches the result. So we have less spamming of the backend DB. And here you will also notice that there's the arbiter call. If this function happens to exist, then it will be called asynchronously. And if it returns false, that means the call has been denied, then this particular update will be skipped. This is different than this update hook because this is done per the innermost loop. So you can, with this, you can do many kinds of great things with your SQL on the back end. For example, like parsing your where clauses and deciding that this query did not change this client's subscribed data. So for example, if you have subscriptions to tables, right, but they don't consider the where clauses. So you don't want to update all of the users just because one user's row changed. You want to only notify that one user. And I couldn't do this myself because parsing the SQL actually with these conditional clauses actually becomes super difficult. And there's like a 40 megabyte Node.js library that could do that for me, but I didn't want to make that a dependency of Socio. So if you want to use it, you can. However, do understand that this function will be spammed quite hard. As for the other thing here, we have a logging object now instead of just saying verbose true or whatever. And this is done because there are quite a few options you can pass in here now. And so for this update, I had to actually infiltrate and hack the NSA, and they did not like that. They have informed me that I am on multiples of their lists. I can't keep track anymore. But I think it's worth it because now the logger actually has a debug log level and supports multiple different levels. And there are some other things, for example, like you can turn off the color because I believe Firefox doesn't display the color in the terminal in the dev console like Chrome does, and it ends up just spamming weird characters in there, and that's like not readable, so you can just turn that off. And unfortunately that has to be a static global setting. So another cool update now is endpoints. So you can specify an endpoint rather than SQL for all those of you who are still paranoid. So you can do something like this where you specify the name of it, and you can't specify both of these. So you just specify the endpoint and you can still give params and whatever. This will just resolve this string to an SQL string on your backend through a Socio hook. Here in the documentation under endpoint hook section, you can see one possible way that you could handle this. So you just handle that hook and you somehow resolve that to an actual SQL. So for example, this could be the get that I just wrote there. And this doesn't need to be encrypted on the backend. You can also make endpoints and props encrypted now, just by again putting the Socio in front of there. You're gonna want to make this more complicated though. I do add random numbers at the start and end of these strings, and I replace all spaces with random numbers by my own format and then take them out when needed to protect against known plain text attacks. But still, this string should actually be longer and more complicated than this. It would be great if it's not guessable, because using endpoints this way with encryption might make it easy to find out your actual secret key on your backend, which is no good. So just add more stuff here, I guess, I don't know. But you can use it if you want to. Similarly for props, you just add the Socio template tag function in front, and it will get encrypted and then decrypted on the backend automatically. Same as the SQL here. Alright, so then for this feature I actually had to speak with God, and he showed me the light. So the basic idea here is you can send the differences in the prop values rather than the whole prop, because maybe some of you crazy front-end devs out there might want to actually build games and stuff with Socio, so like Kahoot and whatever. So you could use props for this very well, so to just keep in sync the global game state for everybody, for all the connected clients. But sometimes these objects could just get huge then, and so instead I'm using a diff library to actually get the differences in the props, and I only send then the differences in those props if the prop is flagged as send diff only, or if the global flag is set as send diff. So when registering a prop, you can set the flag here, or here when creating the Socio server, you can give a global flag that all of the props will be sent as diffs unless a prop overrides that. Yeah, and this happens all magically for you on the front end. All you just get the regular update callback, which is going to give you the full object. So it's going to be populated with the differences applied. So you don't have to worry about any of this. This just happens behind the scenes automatically. And so I guess largely that's it. There were many bug fixes, of course, and all this and all that, but for major features, that I think about covers it. I am currently looking into multi-threading to handle each one of these messages on a different thread. I'm looking into workers and whatever, but it seems like that's totally not going to work because multi-threading in Node is very much limited because you can only send copyable or serializable data to the worker. And so because unfortunately I decided to implement the Socio framework with the object-oriented paradigm, then there's certain data that I can't send to the workers, and this is very much needed data because yeah. And so everything here happens on just the main thread, and I can't think of any way here to actually do any of these operations on a separate thread, keeping in mind that creating and destroying the workers or the other threads also takes time and resources. So even the small operations that I could put on a separate thread is just not worth it. And the main big ones I cannot. For example, the updates and handling incoming messages from clients. So basically, that's sad. Even if I rebuilt Socio, the library that I'm using, the WebSocket library that I'm using, works with callbacks and stuff. So I also can't send those handlers to separate workers either, unfortunately. I was thinking maybe this entire Socio server class instance could be just offloaded on a new thread. That would be at least a slight optimization, I guess. But I don't know, let me know what you think if you have better ideas. Having mentioned OOP here, I think this quote fits very nicely. Object-oriented programming is an exceptionally bad idea which could only have originated in California by the great mind of Dijkstra. So tune in next time where I build support for Web 4.